Welcome to Wrestling Travels Lockdown Sessions, presented to you today by our friends in New York City, True Heel Heat. They've got great podcasts, great reviews. Please check them out, TRU Heel Heat. But speaking of having a great day, and something just beeped on here, I think we're still recording, but welcome to the show, Randy Hogan joining us today. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, brother. How are you doing?
Excellent. Coming to us from the Sunshine State, am I right?
It's sunny, man. It's raining, but it's still in the high 80s here.
Wow. Now, I'm up here in Wisconsin.
I've been working on my tan so I can stay pretty, taking my vitamins, hanging a banger, baby.
And you still, how often do you work out now?
Every chance I get. That could be a little bit every day. I've been rehabbing for about a couple months now. September 2nd, I had a full ankle replacement. Like they do the knees, they put the prosthetic in instead of fusing the ankle. So that was in September. So I really can't even be, right now I'm hobbling around with a big old boot. But it'll be probably the 1st of January before I'm walking around with one of those ankle braces, and then it'll be probably the middle of summer before I'm free of everything. So
I don't even know if I've heard of an ankle replacement. That's
the only guy I ever heard of that had an ankle replacement was Jimmy Snuka.
Really?
The only one ever. I can't even find any friends that had it done. In the old days, they'd fuse it. So then your ankle is just stiff, forever. So you're walking with a gimp and everything else. Replacement, like I said, it's just with the knee. It's a lot of rehab. It's a lot of pain initially, but it should be back to dropping the leg drop around January, February.
That's awesome. How long does that surgery take?
Well, the surgery wasn't long, just a couple, 3 hours. Like I said, it's just, if you know anything about a knee replacement, they go in, they cut out the bad part of the ankle, which is pretty much on the top of the ankle, the joint that makes your ankle go forward and backward. And they take a prosthetic piece in there, which is plastic and metal, and they hammer the top part into the bone and it moves. It's amazing. So,
it is.
But it's very rare to have done. And I said, well, that's the way to go, because I didn't want to be hobbling around any more than I have to. Even though my ring days are long past, I get these conventions and do them every chance I get. And every once in a while at the convention, they'll have a match like at night or something in town. And they'll introduce us. And, every once in a while I might have to do a little, I can't do a run-in anywhere, but I'll do a walk-in, Go in and drop a leg on the bad guy and slip out and go away and get a pop. So. Absolutely. But that's about it right now. But I'm just loving every minute of it. It's funny because I get more attention now than I got when I was wrestling. And that was, 30 years ago, 25 years ago, And now all of a sudden there's a resurgence in the nostalgic era. The old guys like we were talking about. There's not a whole lot of us left around anymore. But it seems like more and more people are looking at the history of wrestling. Now, they still like the women, and they still like the guys who do nothing but monkey spots all day long, Boy, that's an old school thing. But every once in a while, they still want to see the old guys. So you see guys like we were talking about, Nikita Koloff shows up once in a while. Hacksaw Duggan, Kevin Sullivan, and some of the old jobbers like me, me and George South and Mario Mancini up in New York and stuff. So all of a sudden we're getting popular again. So I had to get me some more glasses, some red and yellow, had to get the Randomania t-shirts done, printed.
That's awesome. Yeah, you know what I think it is too, when I started doing this, called it the lockdown sessions, because obviously we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I wanted to try to help some of the independent guys out and find out what they're doing. And look at that, brother. And, part of me, when I started doing this, I thought that I'm doing it for the boys, but I'm doing it for me too, because dang it, I love talking wrestling, and I love, especially, Getting to talk to you, Nikita. I've had Frankie DeFalco on before. Some of these guys, just getting the stories. Van Horn has promised me he'll come on at some point. I got to talk to George South and Ron Garvin last year, right around this time in Baltimore, at Full Gear. They had a fan fest, and man,
George South and I worked a lot, and we traveled together when it was NWA, and then we were both there, and they cut a lot of the jobbers. First of all, I don't mind that word. I don't care. You can call me a jobber, enhancement, carpenter, star maker. It don't matter, because that's what we were. To me, it's not a derogatory slam, and I think a lot of us old guys, it's not. First of all, anybody who's got a job goes to a job every day. They do a job. Don't that make them a jobber?
Absolutely.
Everybody in real life. Enhancement, yeah, that's what we were paid to do, was enhance the stars. A star maker, sure. We let them beat our brains out to make them look like a big star. Carpenters, yes, because we helped build their reputation. So I think that's where all those terms come from. And I don't think it's derogatory at all. I mean, like most of us, I know, especially you mentioned George South and guys, we won our share of titles, regional titles and stuff. The fact that we went on and let the Road Warriors, pummel us does not mean that we were professionally trained at school, okay, and know how to wrestle. You just weren't allowed to back in the day. If I was in there with somebody like a Brad Armstrong or somebody like a Flair, you got to wrestle. They were wrestlers. You got to wrestle. If you were in there with Vader or the Road Warriors, man, you was a piece of meat. You were supposed to get pummeled because they had to look like monsters. So that was our job, to make them look like monsters. So a lot of these keyboard warriors, like to get on and say, oh, just jobbers didn't know how to wrestle. He sucks and all that kind of stuff. They don't even know. They don't know the half of it,
And that's the thing. Like, that's what I was trying to tell you. I like about what we do here talking is that kind of understanding on that same level versus you mentioned the keyboard warriors. And I think technology allows people to jump onto Twitter, let's say, and have some type of connection with the wrestler and then be able to go, oh, you stink. You aren't anything. But, tell me how it was, because a lot of people watching this are just fans and keyboard warriors, but you guys were treated with respect. You guys are on the same level in the locker room with these guys, because they need you. Sometimes.
By some guys.
All right.
It's different now, okay? There were people, and I'm talking about the over guys, the stars, the big guys. Some of them, they really believed their gimmick, and they believed they were above you. I guess like in any walks of life, you got normal people, you got some assholes. There were people, and three that really had an impact on me when I first went in the locker room was Kevin Sullivan, Terry Funk, and Jimmy Cornette. I cannot say enough good about those three. Terry Funk, for instance, now I remember the first time I went up, NWA before they turned it to WCW. My very first time, I didn't know anybody. I wasn't sure. I wasn't smartened up in a lot of things. So I walk in this locker room, and now I got everybody. Dusty Rhodes over there. I got Ricky Steamboat over there. Flair's walking through the building and everything else. And you had us little jobbers kind of in a corner like meek little mouses by ourselves. Nobody talking to us, no nothing, And right out of the bat, Terry Funk walks over to every one of us, shakes our hand, looks us right in the eye and say, "My name's Terry Funk. What's your name? I am so glad to meet you." That was Terry Funk. Kevin Sullivan, it's funny because tonight I'm doing a call-in and to a podcast that Kevin Sullivan's on, and doing a thing to actually thank Kevin. Kevin was one that he kind of ran the locker room. He had the monitor there, was in, they call it the gorilla position, which means more or less he tells you when to go out, when not to go out, to the ring and just kind of runs the locker room type. So my first time, he was there and he says, Hogan, you're up. So it was time to go. And that was okay. I said, wow, he said my name. So, of course, I started wrestling every week now. I'll tell you how that went about. But Kevin, about, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks down the road, I looked at the sheet and I'm working against him in the varsity club, which was Rick Steiner, Mike Rotunda, and him. And Kevin had always said hi to me. That was all, which is more than the other guys did, So anyways, it was a tag match, and I was in there doing my thing, and this was before Kevin's demonic days and everything. And he hung me up in the corner in his tree of woe, as he calls it. And then he comes running across, hip first, running across and runs into you and everything. But he was very good. He took care of it. And from that match on, whenever he saw me in that, it was, hello, Randy. Now I'm Randy. Now here's a big guy calling me Randy, acknowledging me, okay, which made me feel like one of the boys. Now I knew my role and I knew the level where I was at, but still I felt like I belonged. And that was because of Kevin, because of little stupid things that I know he don't even remember, didn't pay attention to. Jimmy Cornette was a character. Now he's way off there now, okay? But when he was at his prime, I probably wrestled the Midnight Express more than anybody, teams. And you got to know and work with them. They were great to work with. And Jimmy, again, talked to me like a normal person. He just talked to me like an equal. Where you had other guys, I'm not afraid to name names, like Luger, okay, that just was stuck on himself. Sting was nice. Now, Sting and Luger were tag teaming at the time. Sting was nice. He was a little standoffish until he got to know you. But once, it's funny because as jobbers, once you work enough and the guys get to know you, and I think the same holds true today. You don't whine. You don't complain. You don't do nothing. When you're done with the match, I don't care how stiff they were with you. You go back, you thank the guy for the match. You do it, and you move on. And a lot of guys now, they get their cut. Oh, my lip is cut. I'm hurt. I can't do this. I can't do that. Oh, he's too stiff. Oh, he hurt me and everything. Man, you did that back in the old days, and they're really gonna shoot on you. So I never complained, and I weighed about, I don't know, maybe 225 to 230. So back then I was considered a light guy, and being trained, which a lot of guys aren't really trained that well now, I don't think, as opposed to old school training where they beat your brains out for a month, and if you come back, then they start teaching you. But if you don't come back, then you don't have it in the first place. That was the old mentality, the Wahoo McDaniels type of philosophy. Tough as they go. So, like I said, without complaining and everything else, the guys get to know you. And I was lucky that I could take I was like a cat. I could take any kind of fall. Throw me from any position. Throw me where you want. I ain't doing this shit like through chairs and all that kind of stuff, which they didn't do. But you want to hit me in the head with a chair or a 2x4? Go ahead and do it. I mean, that's what I get paid for, And that's what they did. I never complained. So because of that, George South, myself, Gary Royal, David DeCourcy, who was the Italian Stallion, guys like that, we had the same mindset, and we worked the whole time. We were with NWA, and then nobody knew what was going to happen when Crockett sold out to Ted Turner and brought in all his new guys, Jim Herd, and of course Bischoff, and that came in. But they now wanted guys that knew how to work, jobber-wise. So a lot of the guys you never saw anymore. It was almost like we had to audition, okay? Not only how we conformed to the guy we were wrestling, You know, either making him look like a beast by being a piece of meat, or actually wrestling and showing the guy had technical skills. And a lot of guys couldn't do that. You know, they could be the piece of meat, but that was as far as it went. So those of us that could work, like the guys I mentioned, they kept us on. They kept us on to WCW, where the other guys just kind of, I don't know, fell off into oblivion. So that's what happens to a lot of the old jobbers that you wonder what happens to them. Well, in the old days, they couldn't work. And it wasn't their fault. They were doing the best they could. They're doing what they were told to do. But when it come time to showcase wrestling ability or skills, that's where these qualified schools to this very day come in. Problem with the schools, now here I go already. I'm sorry, I don't mean to go on a tangent here.
No, you're good. I love it.
The problem, and I mean, hear it all the time, is everybody is a cookie cutter. Every girl, with the exception of her hair and maybe her boobs, they all look the same. They all wrestle the same with the guys. Nowadays, you don't have a Dick the Bruiser or a Crusher or nobody like that, Haystack Calhoun. You don't have them kind of bodies anymore. You know, every once in a while, you have a Kevin Owens that'll slip by, or a Keith Lee now. But for the most part, they're all these muscled up bodybuilder kids, you know, that are doing all these things off scaffolds and top ropes and you know, 10 or 20 monkey flips that mean absolutely nothing. When we did something, every move, I was taught every move has to have a purpose. If you grab an arm, even a simple hammerlock, work that arm, and every chance you get, go back to it. That tells the story. You're weakening the arm. Ric Flair always did that. He'd start working on the knee, working on the knee, working on the knee. Next thing you know, the figure four comes up on the knee. They don't do that anymore. Everybody kicks out of everybody's finish. Everybody's going through tables and getting up after the 2 count. And it just, a lot of it doesn't make sense. So that's just like an old man from the old school, you know, kind of giving our opinions. But in the old days, you had, and I'm not sure it was all just the territories, although that helped, but you had stories. You know, down here in Florida, we had Dusty Rhodes against Kevin Sullivan. Now, Kevin was Kevin Sullivan. He was Lucifer. He was a dozen other things, you know, when he went through that. But their feud lasted down here throughout Florida for a year, and they traveled all over, taking the matches and building and building and building and building. Now you might get a build for a month or so. And I mean, you know, how many matches can Randy Orton have with Drew McIntyre or any other combination of these people? You know, they don't have the storyline builds like they used to have, which means it's harder and harder for the true fans like ourselves that go way back. It's harder for us to get invested in the product because there are no superstars on the horizon. There's no Hulk Hogan's, Bruno Sammartino, Ric Flair's. There's no big monster coming to change the world of professional wrestling right now. It's just a bunch of upper mid-card guys that you get a title for a couple of months, and you can have it for a couple of months, and, well, you can have the title, but we're going to change your gimmick right now, you know. There's no consistency. There's no investment in the storylines. And that's the way they're teaching them at the Performance Center here in Orlando, in NXT. It's just the way the business has progressed or regressed, depending on which way you want to look at it. You know, the guys right now are so talented. They are so athletic. They do stuff that we wouldn't even dream of doing. We wish we could have done that back in the day. We'd have been superstars. But yet, they don't have the ability to tell a story. The promos are scripted. They can't just get in front of a camera and from the heart give some type of a promo. It doesn't have to be a long one. It doesn't have to be an old Dusty Rhodes one where, let me tell you about pain and the son of a plumber and all this stuff. He went on and on and on. But now they're scripted, and a lot of them, you can tell it's scripted just by the way they speak, by the way they look, by their emotions. There's some guys out now like Eddie Kingston, for instance, just coming up in AEW. Great off-the-cuff promos, boom. Guys like Jericho, still, a lot of the old guys still do that. John Cena, used to do it. They would give him an outline of what they want him to cover, but his own words. Most of the guys now, though, word for word. And just like the announcers can't even get excited. The Jim Rosses of the world in a match, because they got an earplug that's telling them what to say, what's going to happen, what to plug, and they can't even get invested in it. So, all right, I'm done with my rant.
No, you're good, because you say a lot of things that I say to the guys in Wrestling Travel. There's promotions over in England that'll do the night of the death match. And to me, the cage match and these things were meant to be kind of a blow off, these gimmick matches at the end of a feud. When you couldn't go anywhere, you were leading to the story, and now we got to keep them locked in the steel cage because of interference. And now it's, hey, come down to the arena. And I get lumped as old. Come down to the arena. Every match tonight, all 18 of them are going to be kendo sticks and light tubes and barbed wire. And I'm like, what? And then I have to argue, or I don't argue anymore. I'm like, all right, well, I guess if they're selling tickets, then my opinion doesn't matter as long as they're making money. But to me,
that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to criticize anything of the product today because, first of all, if I made a couple $100, that was good money back then for a match, $200-300 a match. Now they're making $2-3 million. I had to work 2 years to make what they make in one pay-per-view, and that's not the over guys. That's just the mid carders. It's amazing. But so how can you argue with the dollars? I mean, everything changes, everything progresses. The art of professional wrestling is pretty much gone, though, and that's what hurts me. Go in a match now, any company, and count the actual wrestling moves. I'm not talking about the punches, the kicks, the monkey flips, and all this kind of stuff. Actual wrestling match, either on the mat or wrestling holds. You don't see them anymore. You've got 4 minutes of kicking and punching and throwing somebody out and banging their head on something or other, and then coming off the top rope and missing and landing on your belly and holding your ribs. And then the other guy comes up and does some kind of a triple somersault and throws you onto a table, and the table goes through with a chair, and every once in a while there's an accident. And these guys are, how often they're on the injured list now. We used to get hit for real in the head with chairs. They can't do that no more. Now you got to hit them across the back. You don't get hit in the head with anything anymore. Back then, we got hit in the head. We used to bleed, and it was a hard way. It wasn't all this other stuff. People laugh about blood pills and all that kind of stuff. No. Now you may self-inflict yourself once in a while with something. Certainly not on TV, but in the old days, you got cracked open. And you know what? You went back to work the next day, and you didn't bitch about it. You did it.
And I believe I like the believability of a match. Like, I want to be – it's entertainment. But can I not just sit down for this hour and believe? Try to make me believe that you guys are actually getting into a conflict here, not, oh, you're outside the ring over there, but I'm going to turn my back on you, run, and then turn and fly over the ropes and expect you still to be there. Like, I'm old school like that. When the guys are just sitting there waiting. Come on.
Yeah. And that happens. You see that more with the women, than I see even with the guys. Women's wrestling has come a long way from the fabulous Moolah days. Back then, Joyce Grable and Penny Banner and all of those old names. The women were tough. They would kick your ass for real. They were tough women, Then they went through the eye candy stuff. None of them knew how to wrestle. None of them cared, but they all looked good. Now they're moving up a little bit where they look good, but they can actually do some wrestling moves. So I see the women's wrestling actually getting better, more old school, while the men's seems to be kind of regressing more towards the gymnastics and stuff.
Exactly, the spots and stuff. There was a match on last week, because I was on our Wrestling Travel podcast, on the NXT UK, Walter versus this Ilya Dragunov. and everybody,
Yes.
you got to see this match. You got to see this match. It was just more old school than anything people had seen in a long time.
Somebody just sent me that. I haven't seen
Okay.
it yet, but they sent me that.
So very cool. I think you'll enjoy it. What I used to say too when I'm talking to people is these lost moves of professional wrestling, the abdominal stretch, the Russian leg sweep, a lot of this
Sleeper
stuff.
hold.
Sleeper hold. I'm like, what's old could be new again. I did see
Absolutely.
at Warrior Wrestling up here in Chicago ran some outdoor stadium shows in September, and I did see Kylie Ray with a Russian leg sweep and stuff, and I'm like, cool. I saw Alex Shelley with the surfboard on TJP, and I'm like, you know, a lot of people haven't seen any of these moves yet because they've been watching the current product, and it's just it's crazy to me.
We
like,
talked about, you know, some of the old guys like Dick the Bruiser. He used to come off with a knee across the stomach, I think it was, or something off the top rope, and that was his finish. You know, you had the backbreaker. I guess Luger was the last one to use, you know, the rack or whatever you wanted to call it, the backbreaker. And again, Bruno Sammartino, you know, Superstar Graham had his. Well, I guess Bobby Lashley is using the whatchamajigger. Got here I am again. Too many turnbuckles. Anyways.
Yeah, the airplane spin. Now let me do this. Usually we're in the middle of this interview, but let me back it up because off camera we're talking about you growing up here, Detroit area. But
yes,
who do you remember? If you can go back through all the turnbuckles in your head, but who was one of the first people that you saw on television or however it was when you were growing up and that kind of like, wow, latched you onto pro wrestling and really made you become a fan?
Dick the Bruiser.
Dick the Bruiser, awesome.
Hands down, no thought. The half a generation up from that then was the original Sheik.
Right, because he was running Detroit,
you know? Yeah. Now you still had the Wilbur Snyders and a lot of the names in that that came in whack, but Bobo Brazil, the Sheik, and Dick the Bruiser were my three wow guys. I mean, that's who I look forward to.
And so did you saw him on television as a kid? Did you attend any live wrestling before you got into it?
Every one of them, man. I started watching on TV with my grandparents. Now, my mom and dad used to just laugh. Oh, that fake crap, la-di-da-di-da, you know. My dad's only claim to fame was once he went to a match and walked out of the arena with Buddy Rogers. He says, yeah, I walked out with Buddy Rogers. That's his interest in wrestling. They never went. They didn't follow. They didn't watch it on TV. They did nothing. But my grandparents, man, on the edge of their seat when wrestling was on. And don't tell them that ain't real. And I didn't know any different either. So they got me hooked. So once, I guess, I don't remember exactly, probably monthly, every 2 months, they had the big matches down at the Olympia Stadium, they called it, in Detroit at the time. And they'd say, Randy, we got tickets to wrestling. So they took me to every match. And these were the guys that we're talking of now, big matches. And I got to see those names. I got to see Buddy Rogers and Lou Thez and Pat O'Connor. And again, the ones we have already mentioned. And the Giant Baba, even when he was young, 7 foot tall. Nobody saw any type of an Asian guy that big before, you know. So this went on my whole life. So finally, 16 years old, got my driver's license. I went downtown, I bought tickets. And one of the highlights was I got to say, hey, Gramps, look at, I bought them tickets and took them to the wrestling match. Still turns me up.
No, that's
memorable, and that's how I came up. And I did that, you know, always believing, even logic and common sense. Well, how could they do that without splitting the guy's head open or something, you know? Pepper Gomez had a cast iron stomach.
Right.
And they used to jump off the top of a 12-foot ladder and land on his stomach. And he got up. He was okay. You know, just little gimmicks like that. How can that happen, you know? but I remained a fan, a full hardcore fan, or mark or smart or whatever you want to call guys nowadays, and I learned as much as I could. But again, no internet, eventually they came out with the dirt sheets once in a while, Wrestling Observer or things like that. And I subscribed to them all, so I knew what was going on a little bit. And finally, at 30 years old, was in a position to say, still, I wonder what's real and what's really fake. I really want to find out. So backing up a little bit.
Yeah.
In my 20s, mid-20s, I played in a band with my ex-wife called Brandy. Bonnie and Randy made Brandy. And we used to travel all over the country. This was before disco and that. And we had like an 8-piece show group and played the hotels and resorts, and went out to the Flamingo in Vegas, and then just that kind of a show group of that. And we played a Holiday Inn circuit quite often in the South. And one of the Holiday Inns was in Columbus, Georgia. Every Wednesday night, and that was part of NWA territory at the time, Fred Ward Promotions, which was with Jim Crockett. They'd have wrestling and TV tapings at the auditorium. So, of course, I went all the time. And I left Columbus and ended up, I was in the restaurant business. So I bought a restaurant and sold it and ended up with 7 restaurants. Moved down to Florida and sold the restaurant. And that's when I really got the bug. Okay, is this real? Is this fake? So when I was playing the Holiday Inns in Columbus and the wrestlers used to stay there, I knew them all coming in. I mean, not personally, but their faces, One that I really got close to and friends with to this day is the original bad boy, Eddie Mansfield, Continental Lover, the one that went on 2020, exposed the business.
Right. Yeah.
Eddie,
okay.
Yeah. There's a big story behind that too, but anyways, so I got to be good friends with him, and he would come over to the Holiday Inn so he could lay by the pool in the sun. And we got to talking, and there was a brother tag team, Ted and Jerry Oates. Now they were regional, but did a lot in Japan, a lot of stuff. They were definitely the big boys. Anyways, Jerry owns, to this day, has a gym there. So I used to go work out at the gym with Eddie, and kept in touch with Eddie when he went around the country wrestling and stuff. So anyways, my restaurant business took me back. And I said, okay, well, what am I going to be now when I've still got this urge to see about wrestling. I didn't want to be a wrestler now. I just wanted to know, is it real or is it fake? So I picked up the phone from Boca Raton, where I was living, and called Jerry Oates in Columbus. And I said, Jerry, do you know anybody down here that trains wrestlers? And he said, well, there's only one guy I know, and that's Hiro Matsuda. He trained, Hulk among others, but he was Luger, very selective though. And he said, but he says, I train guys up here too. And I knew he did. So we talked back and forth, and next thing I know, I was packing up everything I had in my old Thunderbird and driving back to Columbus, Georgia. I got a job managing a Po Folks restaurant, which was like a big cafeteria thing in the South. And that's what paid for my training. Now, we didn't have a ring or nothing. Jerry had an aerobics room in his gym in the back that had just regular like gym mats on the cement floor. That's what we learned to bump on. And believe me, you learn to bump correctly.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, so when I got eventually into a real ring, man, this is like a waterbed, So I learned the rough way, the hard way, okay? So I worked with Jerry for a while, and I twisted my ankle, which is the one I just had replaced. It's been many years. Yeah. It's this many years. I'm just now getting it fixed. Learning how to do leapfrogs, just came down on it wrong, like a basketball player would do. So anyways, that pretty much kept me out of it, and I pretty much had some of the answers I needed. So I said, well, okay, I already paid my money, so I'm going to go back now. Well, in the meantime, Jerry's brother, Ted Oates, had opened up a real wrestling school a few blocks down in an old storefront, and he had a ring. So I talked to Ted, and he said, well, sure, you're welcome. Come on. I literally had tears in my eyes. Now, this is 30-some years old. The first time I stepped in a real wrestling ring. I mean, it just brought back my childhood, my grandparents, everything else, you know, the Sheik and the Bruiser, what they did. So I started training. And again, thank God they trained you the right way. You know, they didn't, you know, you're not running a series of spots on your third time in there. You know, you were in there for months just learning to take a back bump correctly. And until you learned that, you didn't learn a front bump. And back then, I see guys now in all the training schools, they teach them to roll, you know, like they do in judo. Well, old school, we were taught not to roll. You want to get up as high as possible and land as flat on your back so your whole body absorbs the shock, you know. Plus, it makes a big noise when you hit. So anyways, I come back and I work with Ted for 13 months. Pretty much learned, I thought, everything I needed, terminology and what to do. I said, okay, I'm done. So I just went about my life. Going to the wrestling on Wednesday night still at the Columbus Auditorium. So I went early one day to see some of the wrestlers walking in. And there's one of the guys I was training with. Bill was setting up the ring. And I said, Bill, I said, what are you doing? He says, well, I own the ring, and when they're in town for 2 weeks, they rent the ring from me. Oh, we also trained with Marty Jannetty, by the way.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Columbus. That makes sense.
He was right there with us. He was one of the, in fact, he started wrestling as Marty Oates before he was Marty Jannetty.
Okay.
So
cool.
That goes way back. But anyway, so Bill says, what are you doing? I said, well, I haven't done nothing, you know, because this is like 6, 7, 8 months. And I said, you know, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm wrestling this little bar up here in North Georgia. He says, why don't you bring your stuff and come up sometime? I said, I'm not going to bring my stuff, but I'll come up and watch you, you know. And I started going a couple of weeks. He says, come on, bring your stuff, bring your stuff. So one time I brought my stuff. Just that time is somebody didn't show up. So the promoter says, you know, Bill, does your buddy want to wrestle? So Bill says, you want to? And I said, well, I never had a real match before, but yeah, I'll do it. Now, my hair, my mustache, everything was the same except it was dark brown. And my dad's name was Frank, so I wrestled as Randy Franklin. So he said, promoter guy says, okay, you're going to wrestle this guy called the Animal, and he's going to go over. I says, okay. So I get back in the locker room, and I said, Bill, I said, I'm wrestling this guy named Animal now, and he's going to go over. What does that mean? Does that mean like he's going over the top rope? I'm going over the top rope? He says, no, dummy, that means he's going to win. That's how much I didn't know. So anyways, we had a match, and he says, can you come back next week? And I said, well, sure, because it was kind of fun. So I went back next week, and now instead of getting beat, I did a Broadway, which was the time limit draw, old school term. And promoter says, you know, he said, you kind of look like that Hulk Hogan guy who is just coming up now, you know, late 70s. He said, we're going to call you Hal Hogan. And I said, well, okay, whatever you want. I said, but I won't know who they're talking about. Hal, can I do like just Randy Hogan? He says, okay, you're Randy Hogan, and you're going to be his cousin or maybe his nephew. I said, yes, sir. Okay. Now, there's no pay for this. This was free wrestling I was doing. So I went home all excited. My girlfriend, I says, you got to bleach my hair. So she bleached my hair, my eyebrows, my mustache, everything from dark brown to blonde. So I went back as Randy Hogan. And I win. So because of that look, they started putting me over. That's how the Randy Hogan thing got started. Okay, I was not an impersonator. I didn't dress like him. I had a black sequin robe with turquoise boots, turquoise trunks, turquoise lining in my coat. I wasn't his brother, his cousin, his uncle, but yet I'd be whatever you want me to be, you know. Pin me, pay me, and tell me what to say, and I'll be there. So that's how that all got started. And then, you know, courtesy, when you go, you're on the match with a bunch of other guys, and they wrestle other places. You say, hey, Jimmy Bob, where are you wrestling at? You know, and you go watch them. And they introduce you to that promoter, and the promoter says, well, maybe you'd like to work with me sometime. I said, well, sure, I'll come up. He said, well, give it a try. So you go in there. And that's how you get into indie work in the old days. So then, because of the look, basically, okay, I got to the point where they were bringing in a big name, supposedly. The first big name I worked on a card with was Action Mike Jackson, who was a Alabama junior heavyweight champion for, I don't know, 50 years. A couple months ago, he was on AEW at 70 years old and did a phenomenal match against somebody. But anyways, I said, Mike, I says, how do you get on TV? Because he was main event, of course, and I was working the semi at the time. And it's big money now. I think I made $20. I might have made $25. I'm not sure. Now, it cost me $30 in gas to get there and back in my big old 98, plus the hot dogs and stuff. But he had the same story. He said, well, I can't guarantee, but why don't you come with me sometimes? NWA and WCW was doing the tapings at WTBS Studios in Atlanta, TV station, Super 13. So I went with them about 3 times, and again, they were short of a jobber, believe it or not. So J.J. Dillon was in charge, comes out and says, Hogan, you want to work? Yes, sir. Now here I've had, maybe 10 matches my whole life. And so he said, okay, you're going to wrestle in a tag with the Barbarian and the Warlord. Now this is TV taping, studio stuff. And I says, okay, fine. Now, unlike today, nothing's choreographed. You didn't know any spots. You didn't know nothing, okay? Who's going to win, who's going to lose, and about how much time you had. That was it. Okay. So I'm in the match, and again, 2 things I remember. One, the Warlord. The Warlord had to be about 6'7". I mean, he's still out there doing conventions and that.
Right.
And he pressed me over his head. Now, shit, I never been that high in my life. I says, oh, my God, what's going to happen now? And then, he dropped me. And I landed correctly. I just wanted to jump up and say, yes! I was so proud, so happy. But I sold it. So he tags out, the Barbarian comes in. Well, the Barbarian is like Tonga, Samoan, something like that. Heavy accent, that. Super nice. So he's shooting me in the ropes. And he says, Bibu. I said, so now I'm thinking, okay, what the hell did he just say? Bibu. And first time in TV, I know everybody's watching, including my parents. So I hit them ropes as hard as I could, came bouncing off those things, not knowing nothing. Next thing, I got a size 15 right in my face. My nose shatters. Blood everywhere. So what happened is what he was doing was saying big boot, like watch out for the boot. But the boot, I didn't understand what he's saying, so I come out and there was that big boot right in my nose. So I guess they took pity on me. And J.J. Dillon said, can you come back next week? I said, yes, sir, So now I'm making $50 a match, all because of Mike Jackson, okay? So then what I didn't know was I was actually making $150 a match, but Mike was taking $100.
Oh, jeez.
And he had about 5 of us guys up there doing the jobs. So finally the big guys heard about it, put a stop to it. Mike Jackson was gone, and we got in. So I went from $50 now up to $200 doing a 3-minute TV squash match, Yeah, pretty good. I was happy with that.
Not bad at all, yeah.
So, but again, even with the nose, never complained, never nothing, laughed it off, came back. And like I said, you get to know certain guys, you work with certain guys, they know you're not going to whine, you can cry, they can do whatever you want. I remember the first time I wrestled Vader, he was a complete prick. But anyways, we're in the locker room, he's sitting in a chair and he says, come here. And he presses me to see if he could lift me over his head. He says, now plant your hands on my shoulder, and that to brace yourself, to keep yourself level. I said, okay. So he did that the first time, and then the second time he didn't care. At that time, he was really stiff. Part of it, I don't know if he knew any better because he had just come from Japan, which is a very stiff style anyways. So he would, again, beat me to death. In fact, at the end of the match, he did a monkey splash off the second rope and stuff. Pancake. He did 2 of them on me, and they were okay. Again, I wanted to say, wow, that was great. The third one, boy, he put all that 400 pounds right on me. They come out from the locker room, the referees, Nick Patrick, I forget who else, but they thought I was legit hurt. You know, I said, no, I said, I'm okay. Carried me back, but they thought he really hurt me. And because that was his reputation. And he did, but I wasn't going to tell anybody. And because of that, I worked steady as much as I wanted every time there was TV. Then they say, can you do a house show once in a while? And I said, well, sure I can, because then they were doing, 3 or 4 nights a week. And then it said, well, can you travel? And I said, well, yeah, I can travel too. So that's how the whole thing started with the NWA, with me and George South and a bunch of others, and graduated to WCW and stayed there until I cracked my clavicle with Rick Steiner, wrestling a TV match in Savannah. And he used to do a lot of suplexes, belly to backs.
Yep.
I was landing on my head. I wrestled him half a dozen times, always landing on my head. So he went behind. I said, well, I'm going to turn just enough and try to catch it across my shoulders or my back instead a little bit. Turn too much and just crack the clavicle. So at that point, I tell the referee, I says, shoulder us. It was just about time anyway, take it home. So it goes to the finish, and of course he gives me a power slam, which felt like I was getting shot again. So that pretty much ended my full-time wrestling. Came down to Florida, bought a restaurant. The local newspaper picked up professional wrestler Randy Hogan just bought this Cedar River seafood restaurant, so I had to keep Randy Hogan alive again. So I had to keep the hair blonde, mustache blonde. I had little 5x7 pictures. Little kids would come in, and I'd tell them a little about what's going on, about this guy, that guy, autograph a little picture for him and stuff. So it was like a Ronald McDonald, kids would say, Mom and Dad would say, where do you want to go eat? Oh, let's go see Randy Hogan. So that carried me on through, and then they started doing TV down here at Disney World, at Disney Studios. So I made a couple of calls and went back doing TV again. It kept me on TV. It kept me relevant for my restaurant business. And I just kept doing that until they didn't do it anymore. So that's my whole life story.
There it is. That's awesome. I got a couple questions.
Take up all your time.
No, I love it. I love, because I can eat this up, because I'm like a little kid listening to it. Even though I'm 46, I'm eating it all up.
Yeah. Well, this June I'm going to be 70, and I feel like a little kid reliving it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, have you? Because we're from the United Kingdom, is Wrestling Travel in Manchester. Have you ever been across the pond to like the United Kingdom and wrestled?
Oh no, I want so much, and there's a friend of ours, Stewie, and a couple other people over there that's saying the same thing. I reached out to the convention they have over there for Love of Wrestling or something. Is that what it is? Yeah. But they were interested in me, at the time. Of course, it was late when I heard about it, anyways, because Fred Ottman, Shockmaster, whatever. That lives by me here. He's going, and a couple other local. A lot of us living here in the Tampa area. Barry Horowitz, of course, another old buddy of ours, and so we all want to do that, and we're chomping at the bit to get over there. But it's a timing thing now, of course, and opportunities. You don't have the conventions that we have over here, so. But I'm still hoping. I've got fans over there that have become, through the years, friends now. So I'd even have a place to stay, I imagine, any place I went over there. And I've got them in Ireland. I've got them in Scotland. I've got them all over England. The UK is pretty saturated.
It's too bad that you didn't know somebody that worked for a company that dealt in wrestling and travel. Like if there was a company.
Like Wrestling Travel.
Like Wrestling Travel. We'll have to keep in touch, Randy, and we'll have to see what we can do if this world can get back to normal, where we can travel. Then we've got to see what we can do to get you over there.
That would be one of that. That is a dream come true.
There we go. We'll figure it out. We'll figure something out. Once the world sorts itself out, then we can start solving the problems. You know, once we get through this pandemic, something like that is going to seem like nothing. We'll sort that out. So we got to get you over to the UK. So we got to stay in touch. My next question has to do with, I told you off camera, I'm a big AWA fan. Now, the first time I ever got to see professional wrestling live in my hometown, and believe it or not, it was under the big circus tent that they brought out in the summer. And It was, we always watched the AWA, but this was the NAWA that was going to come to our town. And it was every jobber that we saw on TV. Now they had their own thing. And I remember, do you know Jake the Milkman Milliman?
Absolutely. Who knows?
Jake was Jake the Russian Liqueurs. And I think Pete Sanchez was a big Sheik, and Frankie DeFalco was there. And that's what the first time I ever got to see wrestling live. But what I'm curious about is, when you're down there with the NWA, did you guys do anything similar where you were working with any other regional promotions like yourself and George South, or were you strictly working the house shows and the TV matches?
Trying to think back. A lot of the TV tapings we did in the house shows were during the week. So if it was, and again, it was territorial. So we were usually within a day's driving distance at the most. If we went someplace, like I remember, you know, they talk about the life nowadays. Back then, I remember me, George, Gary Royal, and the Italian Stallion hopping in something like a Ford Escort in Birmingham, Alabama, after a TV taping, driving straight through to Michigan and doing TV in Michigan. Coming back, we couldn't make it, so we stopped at a little Motel 6, took the mattress off of the bed. So 2 guys were sleeping on the mattress, 2 guys on the box springs, eating at a buffet. So that's kind of how it was. But anyway, back to your question. If we had a layover or something for a day, we would have to individually reach out to a local promotion and say, hey, you know, you got a show going on. Can we be on it? Would you like us to be on it or something? There was one in North Carolina somewhere, I know. I think all we did was set up a merchandise table. I don't know. I don't think I made maybe $20 or $30. But, you know, they probably had 100 people in the rednecks in the crowd, you know, and everything. And it was just a fun show, just to stop. But, yeah, that's the only way we could do it. The NWA or WCW did nothing to line us up extra places.
Just to put that in like today's terms, you're doing that without cell phones. We're talking pay phones and newspapers and stuff, trying to figure that stuff out. That's crazy.
Right.
When you think about it, what the lap of luxury that we're really in today. If you can figure out the technology, some of us, it might seem like it's luxury, but we've got to figure some things out.
That's why I have a beautiful, smart wife that does all my tech stuff for me.
Good answer.
And let me tell you, Barry Horowitz, our friend Barry Horowitz, shut up. Barry Horowitz, he's got a son that's a real techie that does all his stuff. So I'm not alone in this. And no,
it looks like it. And from the sounds of it, it looks like you might even get dinner tonight.
Yeah, she just walked in the door with a pizza.
I'm not cooking.
She spent all day slaving off that baby.
That's slaving off the pizza. So let me, and I want to be respectful of your time. So I'm just going to give you a couple more questions, Randy, and maybe we could do this again someday down the road when we get you over to the UK, because I think you've got plenty of these stories are great, and you go to a convention like For the Love of Wrestling, I think.
But you got to get me, brother, before my brain goes and I forget them. You know.
I know we'll write some stuff down. Now, George South wrote a book. Have you ever thought about writing down some of your stuff?
No, but it's been mentioned a couple of different times. You know, in all honesty, I have a friend that just wrote a book. called something in the square circle. Joe Abel is his name. Lives. In fact, we're going to share a table at a convention coming up. I'm not sure that I would sell enough to warrant the time and the expense and everything else. You know, if I was a big name and was all over Amazon and TV and really a relevant player in the game, it might make a difference. But I think as much as I would like to do it, it probably wouldn't make anybody any money. So what's the purpose?
Yeah, I'm gonna put you on the spot here right now, live, and you can feel free to tell me to piss off or whatever. But since you're not gonna put a book out, and since I could use more viewers, do you have a really good story that would be in a book? But since you're not gonna put a book out, you can tell me right here a really good wrestling story, maybe one you haven't told before, or something really exciting. We could hype it up.
Gosh. We might have to save that for the next show.
Save it for the next one. That's what we call the hook.
I have a lot of little experiences and stuff, but I don't have any big major stories that I can remember. I remember being in the locker room TV taping, and a bunch of the big guys come in, and Rick Steiner was just laughing his ass off because he went to a shoe store, took off his old shoes, put them in the box, put the new shoes on his feet, put the box back on the shelf, and walked out the store. He was just bragging about stealing a pair of sneakers, you know. Now this is, you know, Rick Steiner, they were the world champs at the time. It was cute. But that, and then there's experiences that I had with Vader that weren't really funny or pleasurable. The squashes. The Road Warriors, working with them when they first got started, they didn't know this stuff was fake. I mean, when they clubbed you with a forearm across your back, they were hitting you with a log or something. Just so many things, you know. And I saw so many. We talked about the old jobbers that could or could not work, you know, and one that was trying his best against Eddie Gilbert at the time and missed the spot, and Eddie Gilbert just tore that guy up, beat him in the ring. Back in the locker room, you never saw the guy again. Same thing with Dr. Death Steve Williams, who was, some say, under the influence a little bit, grabbed a guy by the throat that missed a simple spot. Well, not a finish, you know, and they had to pull Steve off of him. So just a lot of little things like that. But I will think it's a good story.
We'll think of some good stuff for the next time. Well, do you have a favorite do you have a match that kind of sticks out in your head, like, hey, that was one of my favorite matches? Or are they all your favorite? I hate to – some people can pick out a match and think, hey, I really thought this was one of my favorites. And some people are like, well, hey, I have too many.
A couple of memorable ones. Of course, like sex, you always remember your first, you know. So I'll always remember the Barbarian and the Warlord, that one. I'll always remember Vader. I'll always remember the first time I worked the Road Warriors. You talk about a young, skinny kid being scared to death. I'll never forget the match I had with Larry Zbyszko for the United States title at the time, and actually come up in the locker room after the match and apologized because we were the last match on the TV. We ran out of time. So he had to cut it short. He says, you know, I'm really sorry. I couldn't give you anything, you know, as far as the whole wrestling. And it was just like a job. And that really stands out, you know. Like you said, early on, did we really feel part of it or anything else? And a lot of the guys were standoffish, but there was some guys that respected what we did for them. I remember the time Michael Hayes come up to me. Okay, in the Freebird era, it said, "Can you help me out, brother?" And I said, "Sure." God, this is Michael Hayes talking to me. He says, "Can you shave my back?" He's got this electric clippers, so I'm shaving his back. Yeah, again, stupid things like that.
Yeah, no, that's funny. That's the stories that people like to hear.
Yeah, and winning one of my first titles, you know, that I ever won through the years. Those always stand out too.
What was your first title? Do you remember what it was?
Florida Junior Heavyweight Champion.
Very cool. Florida.
And then I was the Alabama Junior Heavyweight Champion, the Georgia Junior Heavyweight Champion, the Alabama Tag Team Champions. I had a bunch of those down the way, little regional things. But talking about jobbers, they just get their brains beat out on TV. They don't know the other side of it. So
But that's and that's kind of like when those guys came up here, they had their own like territory and federation. So a couple more questions. I just want to, on current wrestling, we've talked about AEW and WWE, but did you get a chance to watch the bringing back of the studio wrestling of NWA? And what were your thoughts on that?
I watched a little bit of it, and I thought they were really onto something, you know, maybe because it was in the studio and the commentary board behind them, they were standing there and the wrestlers come up to it. It had that old school feel. So I don't know if it was better or if it's just from an old guy, you know, reminiscing
Nostalgia,
the old days.
yeah.
But I thought they were really onto something there. So unfortunately, unless you are on mainstream TV, you're not going to make it. You know, the internet's the distant pay for cable things and everything else. And I'm talking about the NWA, the Powers, and the Impact, and a lot of things that aren't on your main channels like the WWE, AEW, NXT products. I don't think they're going to compete. And because of that, it's hard for me to get invested in a lot of them.
Before I ask you my most important question, my second to last question is this. Now, did your grandparents ever get to see you in the ring, Randy, at all? The ones that took you to? No. Okay.
No.
Well, they had the best seat in the house up
They
top,
probably
so.
passed away 10. They probably 26. They probably passed away close to 10 years before I got into it.
Well, they got to see you from a higher place then. So that's.
But I can't tell you that the milestones that I made, they were not the first thing on my mind. The first time I stepped in a real ring, first time I was on TV, the first time I was talking to a real guy, the first time I realized that the Sheik really wasn't a Sheik, that he speaks English. Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, you must have, as you're discovering stuff, must have thought, if I could just talk to them.
It broke my heart, man. It broke my heart.
Fantastic. So my final question, as always, is the most important question I ask of anybody. To everybody watching us, the fans, how can they keep up with you on social media? Where can we get Randy Mania gear? You might have to, the wife might have to tag in for this one. But how do we keep track of you?
I am so simple. Like you, technology-wise, very challenged. I have Facebook. It's either Randy Meal, M-U-E-H-L, or Randy Hogan. It'll show up. And I also have a site called Randy Hogan Stuff. All on Facebook. It's got everything listed that I got. I got pictures. I got keychains. I got T-shirts. I got Randomania T-shirts. I got NWO T-shirt, HWO, I should say, Hogan World Order T-shirts, signature shirts. I got sunglasses. I got beanies. I got wristbands. I got all kinds of stuff. And it's none of it's expensive. I don't rape anybody. Anybody who has enough interest to even look at my stuff or inquire or want to buy something and become a true randomaniac, I just love them to death, and I'm not going to take advantage of it. You know, shipping everything I sell domestically here, free shipping. If I send something overseas, it's whatever I pay shipping. I don't have anything on the back end, everything else. I'm very transparent in that. And I appreciate all the fans. And like I said, Facebook is the place. Randy Hogan Stuff. I mean, if you want Randy Hogan stuff, go to Randy Hogan Stuff.
That's perfect. And did I see our mutual friend in Chicago, John Bullard, just had did he do a drawing today?
Is he not wonderful? Yes. Yeah. Go on my site. You'll see that. Let me tell you, I got a hold of John, and I'm not exactly sure. I think it was through a mutual friend in that. And we have become so close. He is such a genuine guy. I mean, he believes in the business. He loves the business. He don't take no crap with this drama crap going on in the business. He runs a first-class show with his Chicagoland wrestling. He's got TV. He's got radio. He's got it all. So, man, John, if you're out there listening, I love you, brother. And what you gonna do when he brings Randomania to see you in Chicagoland, brother? And that's gonna happen this year.
Is it? Oh, that's awesome. Good. I'm close enough. We'll have to make it down. So, Randy, I want to thank you for your time. I know your pizza is getting cold, but we'll have to do this again. We're going to stay in touch. And when this crazy world settles down, we got to get you over to the UK, brother. So thank you for your time.
And, brother, you get down to Florida, you got a place on the beach to stay, okay?
Fantastic.
Thanks so much for having me.
You bet. Take care of yourself. Thank you.